I have both been interrogated in training exercises and I have been the interrogator. And those training exercises were meant to train you to be an interrogator. Then I also went to a school where and people have talked about this a lot. The school is called SERE, Survive, Evade, Resist, Escape, SERE.
Okay.
And I've been to a SERE school where, they sort of like actually it was pretty sure it was here. It was definitely in California. It might have been like outside San Diego. I think it was outside San Diego.
Okay.
In like the mountains. And they like dropped us off. And it's like a week later, you like evade and they capture you at some point. And I was like one of the people that managed to not get captured. And then like day 3 or whatever, they blow this enormous whistle. And they're like, okay, now you need to, we're going to the next phase of the training program. So show up at this X, within the next 3 hours and we'll collect you. And then we'll move to the like pretend you were captured section.
Oh.
So
well, I saw if you evade it, I saw Mr. Beast is maybe like trying to do the Hunger Games now.
Yeah, I saw that.
You should get into that, man.
I'll pass.
And is it scary or in the back of your head, it's like a drill?
It's both, right? Like this is part of the reason I think why they exhaust you in the training.
So you start to get a little loopy.
Yeah, basically. So I think, the exhaustion confuses you as to like, is this real? Is this not? And then there are definitely things that they do in the training that are meant to confuse you, right? And I probably shouldn't disclose more than that. But it's like they'll do things and you'll think like, oh, okay, everything's fine now. And then it's not. Okay. And so it's definitely like there's in some of the training programs I've been at, there's like a game within the game. And then like at the highest end ones, there's a game within a game within a game.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you say how you evaded capture or is that those techniques?
Oh, I mean, I think the meta answer is I followed the training and they teach you how to do it.
Okay.
And I'd grown up spending a lot of time in the outdoors. I'd been like a amateur mountaineer. I'd summited a few mountains in like Alaska and in Baja, California, and a few other places where I'd done like, pretty extensive outdoor kind of, adventuring and done some navigation courses and been a, scout. And a lot of it is like, if you were to apply your mind to like, how do I escape? It would just all make sense. And a lot of it is just, you can sort of see like scouting programs are sort of backwards derived from like what you'd want out of a good operational member of the military. And so having had all those experiences, you'd be like, I see why I was taught how to read a map at age 7.
Yeah. Okay. When I'm in a hotel, I always seem to get sucked into watching Naked and Afraid, which I never watch at home, but only when I'm traveling and then I can't sleep and I'm just watching this marathon. And it's always people that are like, I am an expert wilderness survivalist. And then every single episode is the same. It's like day 1 comes,
Sucks.
it like rains, there's some bugs, and then they're just starving for like 20 days and they can't catch anything. I
mean, the reality is you just never want to be in those scenarios.
Yeah.
That's it. You never want to be in those scenarios. And the training is designed to acknowledge that. And then the training is designed to say, okay, even if I'm in the worst scenario ever, I know how to get out. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be nice. It's not going to be fun, but I know what it's like.
Yeah.
There's this amazing study that was done after the First World War by the Royal Navy. And they wanted to know why certain sailors survived their ships being sunk. Merchant mariners, naval, sailors. Because they had a very strange statistical distribution where older sailors survived at a higher frequency than the younger sailors.
Oh.
And what they found was that it was the experience that gave those people resilience. And this is a theme in a lot of military training philosophy, which is that if you can give people real experience or even simulated experience, it makes them much more performant in the moment. And so this is actually where, if you've ever heard of this program, Outward Bound.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
This is actually the founding story of Outward Bound. So they run this study and they realize, oh, we should be giving our sailors the experience of having to be out in the middle of nowhere with no support architecture on their own. The simulation of like in a lifeboat. Because if they can do that, their guys will survive. If, the battleship sinks and they're on the lifeboats, are they going to be able to have the will? It's about the will, right? Have the will to survive.
Yeah.
And that's literally the founding story. That's how they started Outward Bound. That's how the founder of Outward Bound got started.
This all makes sense on some level. Yeah. This has nothing to do with what I wanted to talk to you about. I just got interested for a second.
Let's go.
It is fascinating.
But it's good content.
It is good content, man. I like it. Josh Steinman, CEO of Galvanic. Now, do you pronounce that with like
That's
the American? Right. Yeah, okay. Because, you could go different ways with that. It's a security company, which we'll get into. Usually, I keep all this stuff in my head from my guest's background. Your background is complicated, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit.
Please, yeah.
I know you went to the University of Chicago for undergrad.
Yep.
You went to Georgetown for a master's degree.
Yep.
Remind me.
I think I graduated in
2014, my notes say, in security studies.
It was like part-time at night. It took me like 3.5 years because I had a deployment in between.
Right. So you also went to the U.S. Navy. You end up, we're going to get into all this stuff. I just want to give people some context. So you're in the Navy.
Yep.
You're an intelligence officer. You end up writing a paper that becomes a pretty seminal text in the creation of this thing called the Defense Innovation Unit, which we'll get into as well. But it's, for people who don't know, this bridge between the military in Washington, D.C. and Silicon Valley, both from like a sort of investment and strategic angle. Then you go work at the White House with the president and you become like the cybersecurity everything. I mean, you're running from 2017 to about 2021, like so many. This is why I had to cheat. I mean, you're running so much stuff from cyber policy across telecommunications, cryptocurrency, supply chain. Yeah. You were a deputy assistant to the president, and some of this was controversial. That you were so young, that you were running so many things that angered some people who had been in Washington for a while. You were a SOC startup CEO at one point, and then
while I was in the military, while I was in grad school.
So you sold SOCs, and then left Washington and became CEO of Galvanic, which is a security company based in Los Angeles, which doesn't happen very often, and is like this. We'll get into this part of your focus when you were at the White House, but kind of securing the United States industrial base and some things that tend to get neglected on the security front.
Yeah.
Fair?
Probably the kindest introduction I've ever received.
Okay.
As being the journalist when I was at the White House wouldn't even acknowledge that I had a military background. And there are a lot of people that did a lot of amazing things during the GWAT. To be frank, I was not one of them.
Yeah.
I was one of these guys who was just like on the line, going out, doing the work. My jobs in both deployments to Iraq were outside the wire. But, do I have a Bronze Star with a V for Valor? No. Was I in active firefights, shooting back with people? No. Did my team do some interesting things? Certainly. But I've got friends who were in Ramadi, who are in all these places. And so that's a different level.
But you were in the Navy for 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I was at the White House, the journalists would never even say that I was a former military officer. They would only say, Steinman, former SOC entrepreneur, now cybersecurity czar of the United States. I was just like, all right, guys. So the kindest introduction I've ever received.
As I was doing my research, it did seem you predated DOGE, but it seemed like you got summarized as this young kind of techie Silicon Valley type person who was suddenly put in charge of a lot of very important things, and I guess that seemed to be part of the tension.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then we met at a Masters of the Universe type event, which I guess technically we're not supposed to say where it was, but a lot of very interesting, powerful people, a lot of tech people, and yeah. Anyway, I felt like we got along well, and we started talking about things that and you.
Well, you're one of the luminaries of technology, science, journalism of the past 15, 20 years. So
that part I don't know about. I just know that we were talking and I was like, oh, this guy actually speaks his mind and has interesting opinions on things. And so, and stuff that I'm interested in and care about. So, so we're going to get into it. Let's do it. All right. What do we do at Core Memory? We cover innovative, fast moving, forward thinking companies, which is why Core Memory is sponsored by Brex, because Brex is the intelligent finance platform for many of these companies. 30,000 companies from startups to the world's largest corporations rely on Brex's technology for their finances. They've got smart corporate cards, high yield business banking, and expense automation tools that are fantastic. I hate doing my expenses, and Brex's AIs and software run right through those expenses, figure out where we're spending money, and take care of so much stuff for you so you don't have to waste your time on it yourself. Go to brex.com/core memory to learn more and just, get with the program. Let's get going. Let's get out of this archaic finance software and move toward the future. Core Memory and Brex. This is where I intended to start, but it just jumped in my head. One of the things that you said that struck me was that Donald Trump was one of, if not the smartest person you've ever met. Yeah. I think when I think about this as an outsider who's never met him, my brain tends to go, well, he must be pretty smart to have gotten this far in the world and manage all these things. On the other hand, he says some pretty dumb shit sometimes, which makes you think definitely not. And you said it with such conviction that I was taken aback. So for somebody who has trouble even processing this possibility that he might be among the very smartest people, what evidence do you have for this?
Oh, it's absolutely true. If it isn't true, I don't even know how I'd be able to process reality. I worked for that man for 4 years, and when I was in the military, I worked for a lot of people, and many of them were good people. Some of them were not. Many of them were good people. Many of them were smart. I had a very hard time because I learned things from very few of them, right? And that was part of what convinced me to go out and just do my own thing. And, the military trains you to follow orders. It's your obligation. You take an oath on it. And you do that. And, sometimes you have an opportunity to sort of raise concerns with people. But many times, I'd raise concerns. We'd go in a different direction. And just like Amazon has this concept of disagree and commit, when you're in the officer's mess or in a meeting with your commanding officers and senior officers, you have that opportunity to disagree. And I just, for 8 years, it was very hard because after a certain point, especially in the final assignment that I had working for the Chief of Naval Operations, that's the senior most officer in the Navy. I was a lieutenant, 03, one of the junior most ranks in the Navy. And you get into these rooms with very senior people, and you start asking them questions like, hey, how are you thinking about, I asked a question of a senior officer in the Pacific about how he expected to, wage certain types of engagements in the Pacific theater. And you ask them some very basic questions about technologies that are just over the horizon. And we would get emotional reactions from them. And it's just this, what is this guy doing? He's screaming at me because I'm asking him about missile capabilities that are coming online in the next 2 to 5 years. And it's bro, my boys are going to be on those ships that are going to get sunk by these missiles. How are you not thinking about this?
So this is not Trump related, but this person was just like anti-technology, or
screamed against us because we were just like, hey, I'm not going to go into details, but basically we're like, look, we don't think this conflict's going to play out the way that you think. A lot of these things that you're expecting to work may not work, may not be available, may not be useful. And this guy, one of the senior most officers in the Navy, just didn't want to hear that.
Okay.
And so the reason why I say that this is a framing about Trump, right, is that Trump's the first and only person I've ever worked for where it was just like every time I interacted with him, I was learning things and impressed. And it's not to say that he's going to come and like, talk your ear off. It's like watching a master magician, right? Like you go see like and I don't even know if he's still performing, like David Copperfield, right? Or Ricky Jay.
Yeah.
Have you ever,
Oh, yes.
the card master.
I've rabbit holed Ricky Jay.
May he rest in peace.
Yeah.
What an amazing American.
Yeah.
Ricky Jay is someone who, when he was alive, from the videos that I've seen, would absolutely take you down the rabbit hole. And it's not a demonstration of like, I'm smarter than you. It's like he's displaying his passion. He's like, oh, I've read every single text that's been written in like 7 different languages on the theory of sleight of hand. And let me explain it to you. Working with President Trump, it's much different. It's like you'll go into a meeting and you think, oh, these are the outcomes that I'd like from the meeting. Maybe there's planning that goes into that, et cetera. And then the meeting happens. And we can talk about the meeting happening, but let me tell you, at the end of it, all the things that you wanted happen. And the thing is, that's so confusing to most people because Occidental culture teaches us that like methodical discussion leads to methodical action, leads to expected outcomes. That's like the scientific method, right? And those outcomes may be good or bad or what have you, but those outcomes happen. And President Trump is a magician. He's not a scientist. And so you plan for all these things that you want to happen. The meeting happens, and we'll just bracket that. And then all the things happen that you want. And the point is, everybody sees the meeting. And the meeting is like, we're talking about this, we're talking about that. Then there's like this other thing that happens. And everyone's just like sort of completely discombobulated. And yet at the end, everything happens.
So he's just nudging it around to get the outcome he wants.
Here's what I actually think is going on. I think that he is probably smarter by a significant amount from most of the people that he interacts with, that it's like he's designing a conversation. He's not pushing a conversation, right? He sort of sees where things might go and creates sort of barriers for those conversational pathways. And it's so different from interacting, even like the way that we're interacting right now. Like I said, he's a magician. He's not a scientist.
So, I mean, this is a question I always have, like with Elon as well, So then why, okay, they add all this extra baggage onto themselves unnecessarily, right? I mean, by just being so kind of crude and crass and sometimes, like, I understand sometimes you're using this as like a tool, but then there's other times where it's just like, dude, you don't have to like alienate the whole world on the way to this journey, and clearly, like, sometimes Trump's up on stage and he's kind of saying some goofy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love it all.
Yeah.
I think that the rule by scientism, right? Things that match that form of science and maybe aren't scientific. I just think it's done terrible things for our civilization. And his capacity to introduce uncertainty into environments and then shape that chaos in the right direction is not only refreshing, but I think it's actually the tool that is necessary for the moment, for this decade, for this era. because things are so settled and encrusted with just like, you know, calcium or something. It's
Okay.
gross.
So when you see like the tariffs get announced and
Yeah.
everybody's on the internet the next day and they're like, oh, ChatGPT wrote all these things and this was just thrown out in such a ham-fisted way, and then the weeks play out and it's like we're rolling things back and you know what I mean? And what was your interpretation of those events? And we have kind of hindsight now.
Yeah,
So
they worked.
yeah.
Didn't they work?
I mean, did they work?
They
I'm still not
absolutely
sure.
worked. They absolutely worked. What are you talking about? We're bringing in like hundreds of billions of dollars a year now, and no one's cutting prices, right? Because they all have been taking advantage of the country. Trump knows that. He knows it instinctively. You know, I can tell you he knows it directly, right? And what is he trying to do? He understands that if you wreck trade relationships, that, you know, doesn't work out, right? So what's he doing? He like throws out a number, gets the reaction, pulls it back a little bit, this, that, or the other. It is, you know, it's like if you know, it's like jujitsu or, you know, one of the wrestling martial arts, right? Where it's like you're in contact with the other side and you feel them pushing and you're like, oh, no, I'm going to try something else.
And you feel like, I think you said we haven't seen prices go up. Like, I mean, that would be the reaction, right? That the American consumer is going to pay.
Yeah, there's like massive inflation. Yeah. It's just like, oh my God, this product that used to be $1, now there's a 35% tariff on it, and now it's $1.35. And we're just not seeing that at scale.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, we're just not seeing it at scale.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we are bringing in tariff revenue, which is buying down the debt, in theory.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. This is my last Trump question.
Yeah.
Well, and not entirely Trump here, but so, and then what's your take on DOGE?
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I'll say this much. I hope it continues because the things that they are going after are things that need to be addressed, but there are bigger things that also need to be addressed. And I think having a mechanism like DOGE that can go after medium-sized things and then, God willing, big-sized things is really important. I don't think we've gotten to the big-sized things yet, and I think we need to.
Yeah, so like philosophically, I was into this. It makes my mind go numb when people, you know, just excuse the like what's been going on in the government as if that's not just like some enormous mistake. And so, but you know, when you look at the way DOGE was ultimately executed, I mean, it certainly seems like kind of some bumbling, quite a bit of it does not seem like a well thought out plan to me. And
look, I'll say that the media's irrational hostility towards anything done by President Trump, really done by anyone on the right, but especially Trump. And the reason why I think they are most hostile to him is because he operates on many levels, but he is very good at operating on the emotional level that the media have sort of honed in on over the past 20 years.
That part's true.
And so they're just absolutely triggered by the fact that he does it and he's better than them. They used to be very good at it. Now they're not so good at it and he's much better than them. And so there were things that we would plan meticulously when I was in the White House working for him. I'll give you an example. And, you know, I'll be respectful in a way that it was not respectful, you know, that was not, I'll extend a degree of respect that was not extended to me by the subject of the story. So I initiated an effort, led an effort, executed an effort to rewrite the way in which we do all cyber operations in the United States government, aside from certain small area aspect of things that, you know, is not talked about, called NSPM 13. I architected it, me and my team executed it, and I utilized an obscure military Prussian philosophy called Auftragstaktik,
okay,
which is called mission type orders, which we could go into, and probably not worth going into. Very well thought out, right? It took us a year plus to architect this complete rewrite. And we get a phone call from one of the top 3 national security reporters in the world, who writes for one of the marquee blogs, New York Times, Post, whatever. And I guess they also have a print edition as well, but blogs. And he comes to the White House. And, these people are all texting you when you're working at the White House, trying to get you to talk out of school. I was very disciplined when I worked for the president. It was always just like, I'm not going to talk to the press. Go talk to the press office. If they want to come have me talk to you, then we'll do that.
Yeah, I hate people like that.
So we sit down with him for an official backgrounder. And this guy comes in and he's very pleasant. I've heard amazing things about you. You're doing great, et cetera, et cetera. His blog, his newspaper, by the way, has been trashing me for like 3 years. That was very nice. He gives me a copy of his book, signs it, the whole bit. And then we have like a 60-minute in-depth intellectual conversation about like what it is that we're doing, why I'm doing it, et cetera. And all that gets boiled down to former SOC entrepreneur Joshua Steinman had, and then like basically kind of negative thing.
Yeah.
And so all that to say that there was almost nothing that we could do during the first admin, no matter how well-constructed, well-intentioned, effective, useful, name it, that wouldn't get spun negatively. And so I just can't trust these guys anymore.
Yeah.
Because I don't take them to be honest brokers.
Yeah. 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 Especially in the first term. I mean, it was like mania. I mean, people lost their minds on all sides. I do think you're 100% right. I mean, Trump has just played the press like a fiddle for years and years and years and years. It's kind of
and so
amazing.
On DOGE, right? They're like, oh, DOGE, this craziness, whatever. They're executing the powers and authorities of the President of the United States as delegated to him in the Constitution. And they're freaking out about it. It's like, no, man, that's actually the job. Hire and fire people, spend or cut or zero or what, like those are the authorities vested through an election in the President of the United States.
I know. I think I was just hopeful that there would be actual like mega reductions in spending. Maybe you're right. Maybe this has to go on for a while.
I mean, Congress, is ultimately the entity that has to choose to do that. And I think they need to. I know that there are things that are working on that. The recent, package was not about that. It has to be like a genuine spending bill to cut those numbers. So I think the president wants to. But there's a give and take there in terms of who actually has the authority. He can stop spending on things, but the money actually gets appropriated by Congress.
Okay, let's go back to something you were talking about in your experience in the Navy, which is like the stuff that's very top of mind for me. I mean, you were way ahead of the curve. Silicon Valley had this. We had 2 things going on. I think one, or probably a lot, but 2 major things going on. Silicon Valley had this major reaction against working with the defense industry for quite some time, which is funny. I don't know. Funny is the right word. Is comical if you're anything of a Valley historian. Yeah. We're sitting in a room in Palo Alto that's like not that far from where Fred Terman, coming out of World War II, created these bonds between Silicon Valley and Washington and the military that essentially created Silicon Valley and propelled it for the next like 30, 40 years. And then the tech companies decided they weren't going to work with the defense companies. And then you had a defense industry that it was like archaic, and being run by primes who occasionally do fantastic things and then often are stuck in their ways. And I don't know if I feel like movies are to blame for this in a huge way, because I think they give people a very wrong impression of what military technology actually looks like. But every time I see a military system, I mean, they're sometimes literally running on like Windows 95, and it like,
or not.
Yeah.
Some of our best platforms have almost no one platform and specifically that I'm thinking of, almost no compute.
Right. And there's this, it becomes very clear that we had from like the rise of the consumer internet through to today, this massive progress with consumer technology, and it's just like, it's almost like non-existent in defense. And so that means we're like, in some cases, 25, 30 years behind just using tools that we take for granted, like in our day-to-day life. They're more sophisticated than what the military has. So this is a bad situation, right? And you were way ahead of this. I mean, even just looking at something like DIU, which is, for people who don't know, I mean, this was a massive deal. You have this office that's created in Mountain View, California, again, just down the road in the heart of Silicon Valley, that actually creates these bonds between the Defense Department and all the startups working on things, creates this dialogue, this like ongoing conversation, puts people in the mix on what's going on. And then, okay, so you're way ahead of that, because that's like 2015 and it's
2014.
2014. Okay.
DIU was created in 15, but so here's the story.
Yeah.
And there's another side of this story that I was not exposed to that was happening inside the Pentagon. The version of the story that I was exposed to was that I'm working for the Chief of Naval Operations. I was brought together on a task force led by a guy named Ben Coleman, who's about to be the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. Ben and I served in the Navy together. Ben wrote an essay called "The Military Needs More Disruptive Thinkers." It becomes the #1 read post article on War on the Rocks, which is one of these like insider, military blogs. The Chief of Naval Operations calls Ben in and says, okay, you want some disruptive thinkers? Go find me 10 of them and bring them to me. And Ben goes out, and it's like, a good heist movie. He recruits like 10 black sheep from across the Navy. I was one of them.
They call you guys the Heretics.
Yeah, that's right. We were the Heretics. And we get brought in. We meet with CNO, and he's like, okay, here's the deal. We need to go figure out what the asymmetric threats are to the Navy and what the asymmetric opportunities are for us in the future. You guys have a blank check from me. Please don't piss off the primes. He did say that. But go find those opportunities for us. And that was it. Those were the orders. Very Prussian, Auftragstaktik, mission type orders. Here's the goal. Here are the parameters. Go execute. Come back and see me when you're done. And so a bunch of us went off and we each had our own little projects that we were working on. So the project that I was working on, I actually flew out here to Mountain View, went to go see Google X, and, sort of off the record, they let us participate in the Google Glass Explorers program. I was like the PM for that. And so we get the little Google Glass.
Did you take a picture in the shower?
That was like that thing. And we start programming apps for the Navy on it. I had a partner who was a programmer and a technical project manager who I was working with to do that. And the whole thing was we wanted to see if we could take augmented reality and just inject it into operations right away. So we were like, tested these things on the bridge of a ship, and could you just see another vessel out there and have it say, oh, that's the name of the vessel, this is where it's flagged, this is the name of the master, this is the cargo that it's carrying. Information that you'd have to actually ask someone for. And then they'd have to mentally process that and then provide it back, just as a simple use case. So we're into that. Google lets us participate in that. And then I get pulled aside at like the second or third meeting. And the person I'm working with is like, look, we have a problem here. All these people from the Department of Defense keep coming out and like meeting with us, but they never have an ask. And it's wasting, like we've totaled up the hours. It's wasted like hundreds of hours of man hours for Google people. And we're thinking about just saying no more.
So it's just like show and tell with nothing
literally
coming out.
This is a standard thing that happens in the military. When you take over a unit, you go on a familiarization tour where you go meet all the other units that you might have to work with. And you just take a capabilities brief. This is what we do. We're your logistics battalion. Let me tell you about how many pallets we can move an hour. That's it. And that's considered success. And I realized that, two things were going on. One, you had cutting edge units that wanted to come out and just like take the brief. And then two, some of these guys looking to retire, and they're hoping to sort of make some contacts and maybe they get a job afterwards. So I went back to DC. I was talking around with folks and was like, we need, and I'd worked at one at that point, we need an embassy in Silicon Valley that can be the actual interlocutor, can give people those briefings like, hey, here's what's going on, and then only actually exercise those relationships when there's something that is deliverable in it. So I wrote that paper up, then I wrote a public article, pitched it to the chief of naval operations, pitched it to the staff at the National Security Agency and a few other places, thought it was going nowhere. And then on my last day on active duty, last week on active duty, I got the call like, oh yeah, they're going to spin this up. And so I left active duty, came out here, started working for a company that had just gotten through Y Combinator. I joined after, like the week after. And then, yeah, I activated as a reservist and was what's called a plank holder at DIU until I went to the White House.
And so this sets things off on a different trajectory that has gained obviously tons of steam lately. I mean, when Androl started, I think the first story, I think I was working at Business Week at the time. I didn't write this story, but I think they were, actually, I don't think we did this headline, but something that year, they were like the most evil company in the world. And then now are at the vanguard of like a wave of defense tech companies that people are quite excited about. Are you in? Okay. And then going back to what I was saying before, you had these two trends pushing against innovation in the military. Now we have the startups that are accepted and kind of embraced. And then everyone I talk to says that there is like a will and a desire inside of the military. Like people are cognizant that we're screwed. I think probably Ukraine and Israel to some extent have, or at least what's going on around the Middle East have accentuated how bad we are at making missiles, how unprepared we were to deal with drone warfare, things like this. So, and so there's this obvious, in your interpretation, like how top of mind is this throughout the ranks of the military that we are behind where we should be and actually need to find a way to fix this and like have the will to do it?
With the new team that's come in, many of whom are my friends, many of whom have experienced some of these challenges as soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, even as civilians, I think people understand that things are going to have to change. Definitely at the lower levels. I think there's a lot of understanding around this. And then, I mean, what we're seeing is like I have friends that are making 05, 06, lieutenant colonel or colonel, and then in the Navy, commander or captain. I have friends that are coming up on their first look to be a flag officer, like a 1-star. And those people were like 04s, back when we were seeing a bunch of strange, novel, commercially available things happening to us in the field in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think that the awareness is percolating up. It's also percolating out. We have contracting officers that understand that there are new rapid acquisition tools that are available to them that they can use. I think a lot of the building blocks are there. I think we just sort of have to assemble them into the right pieces. And I'm hoping that we're going to start seeing that at an increasing rate over the next 2-3 years.
Because I get pretty skeptical. I mean, I see what Androl's doing, and they're racing forward, but it seems like the breadth of change would have to be so dramatic, and if you believe that like China was actually going to try to move on Taiwan, even call it like in the next decade, I don't see how the U.S. is.
Our entire stockpiles will be completely, used in that conflict in the first week or something like that, and without the capability to regenerate them at any meaningful pace. And it's like, not only can you not like assemble, the warhead, the missile, the bullet, whatever it is, but like, look at the supply chain, the energetics, right? The little explosive stuff. There's chemicals in there, where those chemicals come from. How are they refined? How quickly can we get, 10x of them into the hands of? How are they assembled, right? Where does the steel come from to mill out the shell casing? Where do the electronics come from in order to guide the missile, the guidance systems. Where do the optics come from? Where do the lenses come from? There's just so much that essentially that peace dividend, globalized economy from the early 1990s through really 2017. I think it was President Trump that really turned that ship of state. There were a lot of folks that worked on it as well. I'd call out, my colleague Ezra Cohen, who was at the White House, Matt Pottinger, who was at the White House, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, a bunch of, but really under President Trump's leadership, turned that ship of state around. Wilbur Ross, Commerce. I could go down the list. There's a lot of people I'm going to miss. But you think about all those supply chain issues, and it's like, what drove us there? Well, it was 30 years of just cost cutting and efficiency driving, and people saying oh, we don't have to make everything in America. We can just make the super high end stuff. Then oh, we don't have to make anything in America. We can just do the design stuff, right? You turn over an iPhone and it says designed in the USA. Oof.
California, baby.
Designed in California, right? But it's if you can't make that thing, if it's not an iPhone, but if it's an SM-2 missile designed in the United States, designed in wherever, it's probably designed in California, right? Down in LA. But if you can't make that thing, you're out of the game in a week.
Okay, since day one, the Core Memory podcast has been supported by the fine people at E1 Ventures. They are a young and ambitious VC firm in Silicon Valley, investing in young and ambitious companies and people. Thank you so much to E1 Ventures for all your support. I don't even know what side of the political aisle I'm on anymore, but just for people who think that maybe you're fear-mongering or something like that. I mean, there's a New York Times story from about 18 months ago where, they go to, I believe it was Lockheed and Raytheon, Ukraine kicks off. We send them thousands of Stinger and Javelin missiles, I think, and then I believe it's Lockheed and Raytheon who report back that we've it would take 3 years to replenish that stockpile, and said this on the record. This wasn't even this isn't even.
You had prime contractor CEOs saying that they did not see a way to decouple their manufacturing from China.
Right.
So, which is that's an admission that you can't win a conflict with them.
Okay, so this is my question, is if this is the state of affairs, even if there's steps being made, and I guess it's because there is not a war actually full on happening between the U.S. and China, but it strikes me that some of this is theater and there's not a sense of urgency. I don't mean theater in that people aren't trying to do things. People are trying to do things, but theater in the sense of we're placating ourselves, and that this lacks anything approaching the necessary sense of urgency.
I think there is some sense of urgency, at least in my social circle. I mean, I was the first check into a company building, a missile that can be used in a Javelin scenario, with its own new launcher, and they're designing that thing to be able to be manufactured in mass. I've invested in a bunch of these companies, just super small checks, literally off my W-2 income, and so I'm friends with people building these types of companies, and I think they feel the urgency. I think some of the new leadership feels that urgency. I think if I had one ask for, reality, for God, for existence, it's I want the people that have built this country over the past 200 years, the families that have done that have stewarded transportation, energy, manufacturing, et cetera, to, I think a lot of them are sort of on the sidelines trying to figure out what are we going to do here. And I think there's a huge opportunity for them to get involved in funneling capital and expertise into that effort to drive actual, genuine, full-scale, full-stack reindustrialization here in the United States.
So you think this? You think it happens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I think it's a necessary precondition for the continued existence of the United States of America as we understand it today, and because I think that that's something that must happen, I I'm going to put my entire life into it.
Yeah.
And I have friends, I have 100+ friends that feel the same way.
I'm going to ask a devil's advocate type question, and I'm certainly not the first person to stumble on this. So, but you look at China these days. I mean, people are being uplifted. The cities seem clean. People are healthy. There's a lot of ways that it's like looking better than our cities over here. They're pushing forward on technology. We seem intent on having an antagonistic relationship with them. Obviously, okay, there's a whole bucket of human rights things. If you're not into being run by a communist overlord, we're gonna have problems with that. But same thing, U.S. has plenty of problems as well. Why, do we actually have to? Are they actually that nefarious, and do we have to be making this so antagonistic and sort of pushing each other into a conflict?
So two things can be true at the same time. One, China's a technology-enabled, fascist, totalitarian, communist dictatorship. Two, if that's what they want, great. Does it mean that we have to fight? No, not at all. But America needs to be independent, needs to be able to defend itself, needs to be able to defend our citizens, our way of life. And so I think it is the height of statesmanship and political leadership for us as a nation, for the president, as a leader, to make sure that we have that capacity. And frankly, I would expect no less from Xi Jinping, right? He wants his people to be happy. I hope, one imagines. If you're an Orthodox Marxist, maybe not actually, but let's mirror image for a minute and say, okay, he wants his people to be happy, healthy, wealthy, powerful, respected, etc. Okay, great. Well, those two things don't have to lead to conflict. And frankly, I think if it were up to President Trump, they wouldn't. But at the same time, you can't ignore the fact that conflict is a possibility. And therefore, you can't ignore the fact that the obligation of a leader is to make sure that you are prepared for that potential so that you don't get outmaneuvered, right? Because the worst thing that happens is, the decisive moment comes and one side is prepared, the other side is not prepared, and the prepared side takes various steps and approaches the unprepared side and says, look, there's two ways this goes. One, we can kick this thing off tomorrow. Here's what's going to happen. It's already started happening. In my book, that's a lot of cyber stuff, maybe some economic stuff, but there's a hypothetical scenario. So on D-1, those two sides come together and hey, here's the deal. This is what is about to happen. Do I do it the hard way or the easy way? You never want to be in that position. And so we have to prepare for that potential. We have to be ready for that potential. In fact, we have to go through extensive planning to understand what it is that they expect to be able to do on those days, be able to counter those things and do our own things. So that on that day, they come to the table and they're like, hey, here's what's about to go down. And we're like, no, we know. We've been watching. Guess what else we have in store? So you want to do that? We're going to do this. And now let's really talk. Maybe we shouldn't do this.
On that question, you've written about and talked about how there's plenty of evidence that China has spent years going through U.S. industrial networks. The idea is we know they're attacking Taiwan when we wake up and none of our power systems are on. You've even talked about how China has told us this directly to our face, that that's what they've done.
Yeah.
So what have we done to counteract that? Have we done anything?
So for folks just coming to this conversation, you can go look up Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon. That should take you down a good rabbit hole for folks to figure out what's the current state of things. Those are acknowledged intrusion sets. When we say intrusion sets, we mean we have identified a group of people, really, in a foreign country, China in this case, who are doing things on the digital systems herein described. Salt Typhoon, Volt Typhoon. Go look it up. So it's like, it could be 5 people, could be 10 people, could it be 1,000 people? But the whole point is like, what are they doing? They're going out and trying to compromise our critical infrastructure. They're trying to get access to and enable future malicious activity on sensitive networks. Just go down the list. I can't legally talk about what happens on the inside when you have those types of situations. I can tell you it's the reason why I started Galvanic 4 years ago. So like, that's really what you should know, right? Like, there are many things that I could do with my time, my most precious commodity. And like, this is the thing that I'm doing. I'm like building a team and a software suite and a hardware suite that will allow us to defend against those types of things. So you can ask, like, did I have evidence of this? Did I know this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? It was very clear 4 years ago. It was very clear 8 years ago. It was very clear, back in my time in the military, that these things were coming. And so, yeah, at the end of my White House time, that is what I decided to do. And so, I think in terms of what do you do to prepare, you have to have the right monitoring. You have to have the right capacity. You have to have the right people. You have to have the right intelligence.
You're the first like non-Israeli security CEO I think I've run into in quite some time. What would you guys be doing that's different to a firewall that's different to a what's meant to be a super sophisticated monitoring system that's been sold for 10, 20, 30 years?
Yeah. There's 2 types of security. There's the stuff that happens on what we call IT systems, phones, laptops, databases. Oh, my email got hacked. They took all my emails. And then there's what we call OT systems, operational technology. That's like robot arm assembling car. Robot arm is controlled by computer, connected to network. That network's in a big factory. That factory makes cars. That's OT. Most OT security today is about tapping the network, looking at the data moving over the wires, and it just creates thousands, tens of thousands. We talked to one customer, Fortune 50 company. They'd taken one of these network security monitoring tools. They'd instrumented their global infrastructure. They were literally getting 10 billion alerts a day. It's useless. Glad those companies are out. They're doing great. We like their founders. I'm glad they're in the industry. Check. Not useful. So what we do is we take not just networking data, we go down to the actual devices themselves. We pull data off of those. We go to the firewalls. We go to the computers, into the operating systems. We integrate with the applications. We just say there's all this data on an industrial system or network at your car factory, at your water treatment plant, at your oil refinery, what have you. We're going to look at all of it. We can do that inside our customers' environments. And then we correlate it in real time. And we can say, oh, look, these 3 things just happened. Oh, hey. And then we present it all in a very tight way to our users. And we're like, hey, out of the billion things that happened today on your network, here's the one thing that you should look at. So that's what we do. Yeah, it's working so far.
So, and I for a while I did cover the security industry, and the argument was always that the security guys trump up all the fear around all of this stuff in order to sell more technology. I mean, could somebody not look at, your opinions on these things and be like, well, okay, you're just trying to drum up some business,
Yeah, they absolutely could. Here's what I would say. OT cyber attacks have real world implications. They shut down water treatment facilities. They can kinetically destroy oil refineries. There was an attempt to do that, within the last decade. A few years ago, they basically destroyed Iran's steel industry. Some hackers took control of the hardware that literally pours the molten metal into the molds. And instead of pouring it into the molds, they poured it on the floor of like multiple facilities in Iran, just completely destroying these things.
This is not the Stuxnet. This is outside of that or part of that.
This was called Predatory Sparrow.
Okay.
There's video on the internet of it. I think it was in like 22, 23. So like these types of attacks have incredible physical damages, physical consequences. And if you look at how much people spend on securing those IT systems, is that reasonable? Is that not? I hope it's reasonable. Maybe it's reasonable. I'm not an expert in that. It's like orders of magnitude less that we spend on securing the physical systems. So as a risk manager, and military officers, that's how I started my career, are ultimately risk managers. I would just like, hey, maybe we should actually buy down those risks and spend some money to buy down on those risks. And so, we try not to sell fear. Like, we deliver incredible granular visibility into everything that's happening on these networks in real time. We're able to help the production security teams and the production engineering teams see when people get to those locations, see what they're doing when they plug in their laptop, plug in a thumb drive, authorized user, authorized credentials. What are they doing? What applications are they installing? We give them incredible granularity. But yeah, look, that's the challenge of selling security, is that it's like the mob, right? Like, man, nice factory. It'd be terrible if someone were to, do something to it. But no, from a risk manager's perspective, these assets are uninsurable. Like, most of them are self-insured. So internally, their risk management team should, and in many cases do, have mechanisms where they can literally price the fact that, like, well, we know what the downtime is per day, per hour, per minute for this facility, and we know what a catastrophic loss looks like. And, frankly, it's up to them to figure out what they want to spend against to buy down that risk.
And the securing the industrial systems, all of that makes a ton of sense to me. When we talk about like this bigger picture of protecting intellectual property, kind of like countering espionage, a lot of that feels pointless to me. I remember talking to like the chief security officer of, at the time, Facebook, and a couple other companies, and they're like, oh, we just run this calculus, which is like, we have 100,000 employees, and this percentage of them are certainly, spies for some nation state. And you do things to try to cordon off software code from different groups so that one person can't just kind of grab all the crown jewels in one go. But I think we're only like so effective. And then you think about, I'm going to OpenAI, Anthropic all the time, and you just every time I'm walking through the halls, I'm just like, oh, well, obviously, like, some group of people here are just kind of grabbing some interesting things. That part feels sort of hopeless to me too. But maybe
I think there are mechanisms for all these things, right? There are mechanisms to buy down these risks. There are mechanisms that can be put in place. I've tweeted about it. I've written on the internet. My thoughts are publicly available, especially when it comes to the AI companies. And I think there's a lot that can be done there. I think it comes down to the will, right? The will of these CEOs. We'll see.
When you go there today, they do have they've got this is the first group of companies I've ever run across in Silicon Valley where there's a surly dude at the door, checking everyone who's coming in, and these plainclothes security people. I never ran into that anywhere, like Intel, whatever, even pretty serious stuff back in the day. And then, you always wonder how, I don't know, if that does anything or not. But it seems like the AI companies are at least cognizant of how important they are to some degree.
Yeah. I've met a bunch of those folks at many of those companies, and I think that they are doing a lot in the right direction. My argument would be there's more they can do.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean like securing their data centers against, someone shutting down the building management systems, which is what we would do in those types of situations. I'm actually not talking about that. Like, okay, great. Maybe we could do something like that. No, I mean, from a personnel standpoint, from a like risk mitigation of like IP theft standpoint, not talking my own book at all. It's like, I think there's a lot that could be done. It's like a whole other conversation.
Okay.
I do think there's an opportunity for a counterintelligence company here in the Valley to help folks figure out who's working for them, who are those people talking to, what's the risk of them going to some other country or lifting intellectual property and going out and starting a competitor or giving it to a, peer near peer nation state.
Yeah, I'm always disappointed sometimes in how the lack of cloak and daggerness. That company doesn't exist. I remember I went to the FBI's field office in Palo Alto. It was kind of like 8 or 10 people, and they were all very well-meaning, but it didn't feel like a force. And then the most disappointing thing for me was while I was doing my space book, and I just had this completely, I think it was like a once-in-a-lifetime sort access where I had written the biography on Elon, and then everyone wanted to be like Elon, and so I just got this like carte blanche access to the Indian space program, to Rocket Lab building rockets in New Zealand, every startup in the United States. I got to go to French Guiana. I went to Svalbard to see where all this data comes. Like, everyone was letting me in everywhere. Sometimes I had a video camera with me. I had my camera. I went to Ukraine to the old like secret ICBM factories and rocket test sites. And yeah, like no one ever, I even almost got to go to a launch in China. I was one day away and some general canceled it. But yeah, nobody ever tried to bring me in. I was like, I thought it was going to be my moment. But you think there are people who are like, yeah, sometimes you sort of want, in your head, you want this to be like Hollywood or something like that, but you think not. Or I guess there is some degree of it. There must be.
Yeah, a little. I think that it's just part of the nature of the American system. We're very open.
Kind of laissez-faire, yeah.
Laissez-faire. There are certainly opportunities for things like that, but it comes with a major downside if people start doing things like that. It has an impact.
Yeah. How did you, I'm going to let you go in a second, but how did you become like this? Where were you like as a kid? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Michigan.
What would your parents do?
My family had a small manufacturing company.
Okay.
Mostly sporting goods.
Okay.
Did some auto, very small, nothing serious. I mean, serious things, but like very small for a while. But yeah, I grew up in, what was the Silicon Valley of the 1920s and the 1930s and the 1940s, 50s. In an industrial family. I learned to drive a forklift before I learned how to drive a car because our family business was seeing the impacts of globalization as like other markets started manufacturing things. So, we had to like lay off a bunch of people, and the company got down to like very small numbers. And like on the weekends, it was like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'd go to our warehouse and help my dad and mom like pick, pack, and ship orders. Had good schooling, went to some great schools, and I got into terrorism as a high school student.
This is where I was going, because you're this weird mix of like historian, nerd, and like this obvious patriotic streak. And so I was trying to get to the roots of this.
Yeah, so I was 17. I was going to be a senior in high school, and I went to like a summer program at Georgetown University, and I took a foreign policy class, and it was like, I had to write a paper at the end of the summer, and I decided to write the paper on Al-Qaeda, which was very interesting to me. I'd read that end of history essay.
Yeah, that worked out.
And I thought that guy was wrong. Like literally, I read the essay and I was like, this doesn't seem right. And then, I was like a 17-year-old. I was like, well, the Second World War seems to have come out of the First World War. The Cold War seems to have come out of the Second World War. So what's going to come out of the Cold War? And then like I read this article about the Cole bombing. And I was like, that's interesting. Who are these people? And then spent the summer reading. I mean, it probably wasn't everything, but I literally read every article I could find on LexisNexis using every permutation of Osama bin Laden's name and Al-Qaeda. I still have all the paper, printed everything out, highlighted, and then wrote this paper about like, what's the U.S. strategy towards Al-Qaeda? Came to this conclusion. I was like, we're not doing the right thing here.
You were how old? 17?
That was the summer of 2001.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
So, but you're in
9/11 was about 90 days after.
Yeah. And you're in high school
High school,
when you're doing
yeah.
that. Oh, so we should have. Did you have a
I
blog?
tried. I was in college, and I did get sort of like a tap on the shoulder, and you know, I probably should have said yes. I think that would have been cool. I wouldn't be here, but like,
Wait, like somebody
basically
saw your paper?
It's a long story, you know, but yeah, basically I was in school. I was in a class. I was like came to a class early, and someone like came in, one of my friends, and they were like, "Hey, you should go downstairs right now." We're on like the 4th story of a building. They were like, go down to the faculty lounge downstairs. I like go down there. There's like a guy there, have a conversation. He's like, let's talk tomorrow. Go have a conversation there. Then he's like, bring me all your papers. Come back tomorrow. 3rd day I go back. And then he starts like grilling me. He's like, why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? And I just like ran him through everything. Because by that point I'd written other papers as well that were, you know, prescient. I'd written this like huge paper on Abdul Qadir Khan in late 2004, early 2005. He's the father of the Pakistani nuclear program. And I sort of started breaking apart his network, just using like open source tooling. So he's like grilling me about that, grilling about some other stuff. And then, yeah, ultimately that process led to people wanting to put me on a desk, on a regional desk. And I told them, like, if I'm going to do it, I want to go after the big dog. And there was like an office. And like for people who, you know, and I was like 21 or something, I knew the name of the office. I was like, I'll come work with you guys, but I want to be in this shop. And they were like hemming and hawing. And they're like, oh, it's a different recruiting process. I was like, okay, fine. I'm just going to go join the Navy. And then the Navy found me. And then the Navy was like, actually, we're going to have you go do this weird stuff.
Crazy.
That was a crazy story.
Hobby, man.
Yeah.
Did you watch The Hunt for Osama bin Laden on Netflix?
I can't watch any of that stuff, man.
No.
I mean, it was years of my life. I was super early. It's like probably, you know, I should not have this attitude. You know, I should be grateful. But when the Looming Tower came out, and then what was the other one? The Steve Cole book about bin Laden. Like those 2 books were preciously one knowledge in my mind. And I'm like reading these books and I'm just like, they just published it all. They just published all the stuff that I knew, you know, that was in like, I don't know, whatever years those books came out. What was the Steve Cole book? I can't remember, but it's like his famous bin Laden book. No, I can't watch that stuff. I can't watch the dramatizations of it all because like, you know, I lived it. Like on 9/11, I was high school senior, first plane hits. I'm in Shakespeare. I'm like in a class, we're reading Shakespeare. I was like, only Shakespeare. Second plane hits. I'm like, yo, this is Al-Qaeda. Everyone's like, a what? They're like, it's a what? And I'm like, hold on. I had my laptop in the car. I run out to my car. I get the thing. I like, you know, thumb drive in, print off 10 copies. It was well known. Operation Bajoinga, KSM, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed tries to like hijack 10, 11 planes, crash them into the West Coast. All this stuff going on. We could go down the rabbit hole on that right now. But Al-Qaeda has this like operational attitude where they not never, but like if they want to hit something, they'll hit something, right? Like the Cole was not the first ship that they had targeted out of Aden. They tried to run that up, I think twice, at least once. And like the boat had sunk, the skiff had sunk with the explosives on it. And they're like, oh, this weird thing happened, you know, like a month or 2 before this weird thing happened. These guys had this boat. They were trying to come at this Navy ship. So Al-Qaeda had this history of like, they fixate on targets and they go after them and they go after them until they get it. Actually, you know, good morale move for your team, right? Like we're going to achieve an objective. We're not going to stop till it's done. And so it was just like airplanes. It was World Trade Center, right? The Blind Sheikh had tried to bring down they tried to run that op previously with the car bombs in the basement. So I was just like, oh, you know, it's like the meme, right? I was just like, oh my God, it's all happening right now.
Yeah.
And this is within like 90 minutes of the second plane out. I mean, it was right away. I knew. And then, you know, it was off to college and I was like, oh, I need to find a way. I got to like get into this thing. And so, yeah, I just studied every language I could, studied all the history that I could. And then, yeah, you know, when you're in that type of situation, like, you know, the right people do end up kind of finding you. And that's what happened. You know, that's how I got pulled into where I got pulled into in the military.
And not that your current work's not important, but isn't it like, don't you miss sort of the adrenaline rush of doing stuff like that, being in the Navy, working for the president, and now you got to go out and like sell stuff?
Yeah. It's a different type of adrenaline. Like, you know, the military adrenaline is like, that's a whole other thing. It was a lot of fun, right? Everyone's like, oh, it's honor, duty, country, etc. Like, that's also a lot of fun. And I had a lot of fun, and I was incredibly lucky. So I was so frustrated that these people didn't want to put me on that team hunting bin Laden right out of college. Fucking jackass kid, right? Like, you know, you're going to have to like do something before we're like going to trust you with, you know, going for the real hunt. But I was like, no, I've done it. Like, come on, put me on the team, coach. So I literally walked into a naval recruiting station, and I'm like, put me on a boat, you know, just like put me on a boat. And, you know, University of Chicago is on the south side, not a great part of town. The recruiter's like, white boy, what are you doing here? And I'm just like, I want to join the Navy. And he's like, no, like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I go to school. And he's like, that school? I'm like, yeah. He's like, huh. It's like, we haven't seen anyone from that school in this recruiting station.
Quite some time.
And so I signed up. I was going to be a surface officer. I was going to be a surface warfare officer. And like, I did a bunch of outdoor stuff. So I like go on this like hiking trip, no cell phones. I mean, I had like a flip phone at the time. And I come back, and my phone's been blown up. It's been a week, not exploded, but you know, like there's all these missed phone calls.
Yeah.
They called my parents. Like this weird corner of the Navy called my parents, and they're like, we're going to have you sign the legal documents to have him go to this other thing. We're not going to tell you what it is. My parents were like, he's 22. We can't do that, legally speaking. And so I like get on the phone. These people are just like, hey, we know you I mean, you know, I'm not trying to, again, a lot of people did a lot more than I did.
You have a special set of
literally skills. They were like, we know that you have this very interesting background. Can you come to Washington next week? And I'm like, in Chicago, you know, I just got beard, shagged out, the whole thing. And, you know, I've got an ego on me. I was like a young kid. I'm like, all right, yeah, see you Tuesday, noon, you know, the dining hall or whatever for this facility. And I like get in my car, drive all the way to DC. I'm like, and I had an OCS date, but I was not in the Navy at the time. I'd signed up to be a surface officer, surface warfare officer, we call it in the Navy. Show up to this weird office in Maryland, and they're just like, so we can't tell what you're going to do, but we can get you very close to the things that you're very interested in. And I was like, can you give me more? And they're like, you're just going to have to trust us. And I was just like, all right, sure. You know, fuck it. Sign on the dotted line. And then I like go through all the training pipeline to be like a normal naval officer, even in that specific area. And then like in the last week, some dude just straight up showed up and like completely re-interviewed me. And this does not exist anymore. So it's like you can't find this. The door doesn't exist. So what I'm describing to you just doesn't happen anymore. But yeah, dude showed up and did a whole other interview process. And then, yeah, they were just like, okay, yep, good enough. Come with us. And that was it. And I was not in the regular Navy. And so like, I was very lucky, you know, I'm sort of like round peg, square hole type guy. Obviously I used to say I'm good for the Navy, not good. I was definitely not good in the Navy. I was like very good for the United States Navy, but like, you know,
why doesn't this happen anymore? Why we're not like,
it used to happen.
Why are we not flagging kind of our outliers?
Well, it's funny. This all comes back to the beginning. So Ben Coleman, God willing, he gets confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. I think we should have these types of things. And I think that, you know, and I had a lot of friends and a lot of respect. And, you know, for a while I wanted to be just one of these guys who was just like, you know, follow the order, go execute the order. Like there's pleasure in discipline. There's pleasure in all that stuff. And I'm not saying that I like disobeyed orders. I don't think I ever disobeyed orders. I certainly interpreted them creatively, but like there is a sort of like a Zen pleasure that you can have. And I experienced this in my early training, just like everyone does, where it's like the gunny's screaming at you, get on your face and give me 20. You're just like, okay, I'm not even going to think about it. I'm on my face. I'm doing push-ups. You know, go clean that passageway, P-way. Okay, great. I'm going to go do that. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just like responding. And I, for a while I wanted to do that and just sort of, it's like a mental vacation almost. But like after a while, again, it's just like the way that I'm built. It was just like, we can do that better. That's not going to work. Can we go to this other thing? And it's just like, it just grinds on you. And so I think we have an opportunity to sort of return to that. But like the military still does need that like bulk of people.
Right. But you're saying they decided there was just a few too many of those kinds of people who were making the system difficult? Or
I think the way to do it is to find a way to pull those people into something that is connected, but non-responsive in a certain way. The Marine Corps has actually done a very good job of this with their Marine Innovation Unit that they just stood up. And like those guys are like absolute hitters. I've got a bunch of friends in those units. They have to do the PT exams. Like they're studs. They're like CEOs of like multi-billion-dollar companies, or like hardcore AI engineers at like Anthropic or something like that. But the Marine Corps takes them and they're just like, look, you have to be Marines. You're Marines. You're in your uniform. You got to do the pull-ups. You got to do the run. But we have some other tasks for you to think about, right?
Well, Israel seems to figure this out.
Yeah, they've got that. They've got that weird. There's 8,200. Then there's that other program where they pick like 10 kids a year or something. It's got some, I don't know, some name. I forgot.
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah, like they do that. The Singaporeans do this pretty well. We used to do this. The Americans used to do this. The British do it very well. And so I hope for our country that we can get back there. And I think God willing, we will.
Yeah, I wrote a story. I mean, God bless Waxahachie State or whatever, but I saw, the NSA, I was looking through their recruiting, like where we're coming to campus and everything. And, notably not on any of the list was like MIT, Caltech, anywhere you would be expecting to find your exceptional nerd. It was mid to lower rung.
Look, I think there are a lot of great people that go to a range of schools.
Totally fair.
But I will say,
I am grossly generalizing. But
no. You're making a really important. You're making a really important point, which again, we're bringing that. We started off with Trump. We'll end with Trump. He's making a good point, which is that like those schools are now like 50+% not American kids, right? And there is fraud that happens in those application processes. There is, a whole bunch of bad stuff that happens there. And I think that we have to bring the American education system back to like educating our populace, our people, our nation, right? We have to educate those kids and give them those best opportunities. And I'm not saying don't have kids from Ireland or Germany or South Africa or Egypt or, Vietnam or what have you. Like, sure, yeah, you can have some, but like, I think a part of what's going on is like, there's been this just systemic campaign to limit the number of like heritage Americans that go to the top schools in the United States. And that's sort of what you're seeing in those recruiting things. Like I've met brilliant people that are going to, land grant institutions who like 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago absolutely would have just been like Goodwill Hunting.
Yeah. Well, my oldest son is going to be a senior, so fuck those other kids.
Exactly. Let's get him in. Let him in. Yeah.
Josh Steinman, it's like so fun to talk to you, man.
Ashlee, thanks for having me.
Dude, really appreciate you coming in, and hopefully you'll come back again sometime.
Anytime.
All right. Thank you. The Core Memory Podcast is hosted by me, Ashlee Vance. It is produced by David Nicholson and me. Our theme song is by James Mercer and John Sortland, and the show is edited by the John Sortland. Thanks as always to Brex and E1 Ventures for making this possible. Please visit our Substack, YouTube, and podcast channels to get more of what Core Memory makes. Thanks, y'all.